Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. And today I'm going to be reviewing a Tier 8 premium tank destroyer that might look familiar. Yeah, this is the ISU-152K, with the K standing for bringing back a gun that was deemed to be overpowered on the tank, aka the BL-10 gun with 286mm of penetration and 750 alpha damage, which will make this hardest hitting Tier 8 premium tank in the game. But before all of you start foaming at the mouth thinking, oh yeah, we've all heard this one before, Wargaming take a tank out the game, or they remove a gun from a tank in the game and then they bring it back a few years on a premium tank and then sell it back to us, it's kind of a bit of a meme. Just calm down for a second, because bear with me, I think that they might have actually done it in the right way this time. So the obvious tank to compare the new Tier 8 Soviet premium tank destroyer to has to be the Tier 8 tech tree tank, the ISU-152, which was just top of the tree on the European server a couple of weeks ago, and I think the North American server as well. You might have played a lot of this. I just played a lot of this recently on my free-to-play account, so I've really got a good understanding of the vehicle. Now, the ISU-152K brings back the old BL-10 gun that the ISU-152 used to have before it was nerfed, but also, while the tank was nerfed, they did increase the hit points of the vehicle substantially from about 1,010, I think, or 1,080 up to 1,200, which gave the vehicle a lot more durability. So the ISU-152, it wasn't just flat out nerfed with regards to anything apart from the penetration, but really, did we want to have Tier 8 tank destroyers with 286mm penetration? Not so sure. Anyway, the ISU-152 from back in the day is coming back, but to be able to achieve that greater penetration, Wargaming have actually made some quite substantial nerfs to the ISU-152 to give it its premium status and its increased penetration. Nevertheless, let's just jump straight in with the statistics so you can see exactly where the ISU-152K is better and where the standard ISU-152 is better. So immediately, the ISU-152K packs that full 286mm of standard penetration, and if you load the gold, you've got 329mm of premium pen, which is way better than the premium rounds on the ISU-152. And that is an absolutely devastating gold shell. That is going to be able to go through the front of everything, let alone the Tier 10 tanks that this vehicle will be able to meet. However, it does actually have a trade-off with this penetration increase over the Tier 8 tank destroyer inside the tech tree of having a worse rate of fire, 3.16. That's a substantial DPM loss of nearly 200 off the 2,556 DPM that the tech tree tank has. So immediately, a trade-off there. It does have a tiny little shell velocity advantage, but you're not really going to notice 30 meters a second too much. Alright, so now onto the gun handling of the ISU-152K. It has worse aim time at 3.5 seconds, worse accuracy at 0.43 seconds, it has worse dispersion when you move the tank. These are hidden statistics that you won't see in the garage, but they affect how much your reticle blooms out. So you're going to get less accurate more quickly when moving, or you're going to get less accurate when moving than you would do in the standard tank. And look at this turret traverse dispersion. Now, a lot of people might think, oh, does turret traverse dispersion really affect a tank that doesn't have a turret? Well, yes, it does. This is actually the dispersion that the vehicle will receive when it moves the gun on a tank destroyer like this. And it's double that of the bloom of the ISU-152 tech tree tank. Include this with 1 degree less gun depression and 7 degrees less elevation, and this vehicle is far less flexible. However, it does have one thing that kind of counters this, and that is the gun traverse. It actually has 2 extra degrees of traverse to the left and 2 extra degrees of traverse to the right, giving it 20 rather than 16. This is very significant if you want to use binoculars on the tank, or if you just don't want to keep turning and keep blooming out the gun. And while undoubtedly it won't be as good as having a turret on the tank like you would do on the SU-130PM, it does help just a little bit over the standard ISU-152. So now onto the mobility of the vehicle. It's slower forwards, it's got a worse power to weight ratio, although it does have slightly better terrain resistances, which kind of balances out the disparity that would have occurred in the vehicle's mobility when it comes down to the traverse speed of the tank. With a tiny little bit better, 1 degree better tank traverse means that it's going to be more mobile on medium terrain and soft terrain at turning, but less mobile on hard terrain at turning. Only minor differences here. The armor layer loadout of the vehicle is identical to the standard tank. It does have slightly less engine health, although that really won't make too much difference, and more radio range, but does that really matter? So all in all, the ISU-152K, to be able to get back that BL-10 gun, sacrifices have had to be made. Less DPM, worse gun handling, I'd say all in all, worse mobility. Is it worth it for the penetration trade-off? Well, we're just going to have to see in the gameplay. But just before we do jump into the combat, let me highlight, if any of you are looking at this as a possible crew trainer, it has a standard 5-crew tank destroyer loadout with 2 loaders. It has a driver, it has a gunner, it has a commander. This will work very well with your Object 268 version 4 crew, or alternatively your Object 268 crew at tier 10. So if you're looking to crew train your top tier Soviet tank destroyers, then the ISU-152K is really a good option. Alright, so we're loading into an all tier 8 battle on the Minsk map. Now there's no artillery. Artillery, obviously, it's pretty straightforward what's going to happen when an artillery hits this. If you're stunned, it makes it very awkward for you to be able to keep engaging your opponents. If you get tracked, that means that you're more vulnerable to be able to get flanked by your opponents. Artillery doesn't really make too much of a difference of this vehicle, as I usually like to kind of sit it at the back of the map, try and get off the easy shots, and then later on try and actually trade out with the heavy tanks and the medium tanks using my hit points. However, on a map like Minsk, I feel like sitting at the back of the map isn't going to achieve anything really until the very last part. So I want to try and get stuck in. I want to try and be aggressive. I want to try and harass my opponents. Now, I played a couple of games in this tank where I just got to farm things at long distances. I mean, it's pretty obvious what this gun is going to do if it manages to hit its opponents at decent distances, right? You don't have to be a genius to show, or even just to work out. 286 millimeters of penetration, plus hitting the enemy tank with 750 alpha damage, deals fat damage, makes you good credits. But of course, how many times in World of Tanks do you actually just get those magical opportunities to be able to shoot at decent distances against stationary opponents, or opponents that are not weakly armored because you've got big penetration, but you know, just the kind of armor that you're going to be able to hit if you manage to with that poor .43 accuracy. I had lots of games where I was doing kind of like 3,000 damage in this tank. Really boring replays though. You know, the kind of replays where you just sit at the back, you shoot 4 times, and that's all you really have to do. So what I want to focus on is more of like the close quarters combat with the ISU-152. Put it under a little bit of pressure, and then you can really have an idea of how the vehicle works out. So immediately there, you see me shooting at the side of the UDES 14-5, a vehicle which I'd be very surprised if it had more than 40 millimeters of side armor. Because of the big caliber gun on a tank like this, that means that I should be able to overmatch that vehicle. And when I overmatch it, that pretty much guarantees that I'm going to be able to go through the thickness of the armor, irrelevant of how well it's angled. Unfortunately for me, my terrible accuracy on this gun meant that I didn't actually hit the side of the enemy vehicle there, which is why I didn't do any damage to the UDES. Instead, it went to the right and went through the tracks, locking him in place, but not actually hitting the hull armor. But oh, you know, how can you get bored of hitting this hard in a tank like this? This is going to be a pretty meaty tank destroyer. But of course, it's already in the game in the form of the ISU-152, but should we really have a tank like that become comfortable to play in the form of a premium tank? I'm not so sure about that. Just because there are tech tree tanks, if you make them premium tank, well, what I'm trying to say is, if there are tech tree tanks which are, should we say, good, or good in certain situations, or have statistics which are kind of a little bit annoying to play against, it's not such a big deal because it's a tech tree tank. And quite often people aren't just going to play them again and again and again. Of course, there will be players who do. But as soon as you take an interesting mechanic, like absolutely devastating Alpha, able to take the head clean off, or the turret, I should say, off the T-44 on the enemy team. As soon as you take those mechanics and you put them on a premium tank, suddenly those mechanics are going to be a lot more popular in the matchmaker. And whether it's fun to get hit for 750 at tier 8, whether it's fun to be a tier 6 tank and pretty much get one shot whenever you get hit by something at the back, I'm not so sure. I'm really not so sure. Alright, so irrelevant about that. Hopefully you're able to see now the ISU-152. When it hits, it's great. But the accuracy and the dispersion, the doubly worse dispersion when you turn the gun on this tank, makes it incredibly awkward compared to the standard ISU-152. And even on my free-to-play account, I did notice that the gun handling on this tank was better. So you might be wondering, like, how did you manage to hit that shot? So rewind the video if you want to see it. But what I do when I'm playing big boy tank destroyers like this without turrets is I'll actually lock my mouse by holding the right mouse button in a location just around the corner where I think that the enemy are going to expose their tank. And in turn, what I'll do is look elsewhere. And then as soon as I see that the enemy has come around the corner, I'll just fire without releasing my right mouse button. I'm not auto-aiming at the enemy tanks. And that allows me to get an ambush shot while also still focusing elsewhere and looking for other opportunities or trying to feather other targets. We managed to do that actually twice in quick succession against the T-44 and also against the Revolurise. And we can see that it didn't work out too well for those two tanks, but worked out very well for ourselves. So the ISU-152, this is always the way that I prefer to play this tank. Sure, you can sit at the back of the map. If you manage to get on Karelia Assault, for example, you can just kind of sit at the back and just shoot things that come out into the open. However, on a map like Minsk, I don't really feel like you can sit at the back of the map and expect good things to happen for you more times out of 10. I feel like you have to get involved. I feel like you have to try and play the assault tank destroyer role that I think that this vehicle actually does pretty well at. Alright, so far we've managed to lose about 800 hit points, 800, nearly 900 hit points, but we've dealt 3,300 damage to our opponents. We see that the Jagdpanther fires, however, with the caliber of the gun, that didn't sound like it was the highest alpha damage shell, so I don't have long before he's probably going to fire another 105mm, thinking about shooting the side of the tank, and then I just decide, boy, I've got 286mm of penetration. Why don't I just shoot through those fence posts and still have enough to enter the front of the not exactly heavily armored German tank destroyer? It's not exactly like we're firing at a Borsig either, right, where we don't need any penetration to be able to enter the tank. And bang, Jagdpanther 2 taken care of, securing our second kill of the game, now up to 3,800 damage. But this really now is where the ISU-152 starts to struggle. I think that the view range is so poor on this tank at 350 meters base, even if you have every single advantage like I do currently have on this tank with an excellent crew, with a premium consumable, that you still have to use binoculars on this tank. On my free-to-play account, for example, even with binoculars, I think I was only able to get up to about 450 meters view range, although I probably didn't have situational awareness and all of those kind of aspects of the vehicle. Alright, so in this scenario, I'm worried about the ISU-152 on my left, I'm worried about the HWK being in the center of this map, but I'm hoping that maybe I can just feather out a shot on the ISU-152 here. Unable to do so. Now I'm not so worried about the HWK because the ISU-152 has been taken care of, and so instead I'm going to get forwards. These blooming sheets are on the front of my tank. Can you believe how an awkward position that is? Like, will you get off the front of my vehicle? Look, I have this kind of stuff enabled, probably just for the stream or just for the lols inside World of Tanks, but I would thoroughly recommend that you actually have that kind of stuff disabled if you purely want to be a competitive player, as it does definitely get in the way. Alright, so now in the bush, this is where the ISU-152 is in its element. It's actually got pretty good camo rating. When you have a full concealment crew on this tank, you probably got about 20-25% camo rating when you're moving in this vehicle. And that allows you to get into position, and once you're in position, you are hitting harder than any other premium tank in the game. Bar none. Just trying to think about it. What are the highest alpha damage premium tanks in the game? There's a German heavy tank, the VK... I can't even remember all the names of them now. Honestly, there are getting so many premium tanks in the game. There's a VK that's rear turreted, looks like a VK-4502P, but it's actually been moved down to tier 8 and made a premium tank that hits for 490. There's obviously the Scorpion G that hits for 490. There's the SU-130PM, which hits for, I think, 520, just a little bit above. This is a big step up, right, boys and girls? Going from 520 being the highest alpha damage on a premium tank up to 750 is a big old chunk of damage that you are going to be taking. Of course, with a vehicle like this, it's not the most accurate. It definitely doesn't have the best armor. It's kind of just a big slug of... It is just a big gun on tracks, and that's really what a tank destroyer is. It's almost more of a self-propelled gun, but it does have some armor, which I guess is what makes it inside the TD class. And this allows it to just do unprecedented things with regards to those alpha damage hits. But what I'm trying to highlight here is, let's say that Wargaming just decided to put in a turreted tank destroyer, a bit like the Borsig, but make a premium Borsig that could go faster. Yeah, that would be scary. Kind of what they did with the Scorpion, but by having the Scorpion with 490 alpha damage, it's not nearly as devastating as it would have been if it had 750. Nevertheless, because this thing doesn't have a turret, you shouldn't actually worry too much about these on the battlefield. At least once you know where they are, because you should try and move around them. You should try and do everything that you can to not get hit by these vehicles. I mean, sometimes it's going to be frustrating. Sometimes, you know, you're going to be forced to have to attack a flank because the other flank is being lost, or maybe you're just playing on an assault map. And if that's the case, just hope that they may be not using binoculars, hope that they're as blind as a bat, or hope that RNG saves you, because otherwise you are going to be losing half your hit points in any equal tiered tank, and you're going to be losing a large amount of your hit points in higher tier vehicles and all of your hit points in lower tier tanks. And really, that's what makes the ISU-152 so special, both in the tech tree and now also in the form of the ISU-152K, so that now you get to actually make fat credits while you also have that big boy alpha damage. Alright, so let me tell you about my thinking right now. Firstly, you'll see that I tell my team 5 minutes. We have to get involved if we want to take out the remaining 3 tanks. The next thing that I was thinking at the time is that the KV-4 would be located here, and that I would be able to get around here and flank him and be able to get some side shots. And wow, 2 of the worst things happen right at the same time. And you can see that I'm visibly shaken that I didn't actually know, well, I didn't predict that they were going to do that. I thought the KV-4 was going to sit still. I didn't think that the AMX M449 Liberté was in that position. I thought he'd be going into the town as well with the KV-4. And now I'm caught in a complete crossfire without a turret, in a big lumbering tank. I'm not a sneaky tank destroyer. I don't have the mobility to really get out of here. I don't have the gun depression even to be able to depress the gun enough to be able to hit this KV-4 efficiently, and I'm in a lot of trouble. The Lanson refuses to push. You'll see that I press my F8 key, saying I'm ready to fire. I ping the map, then I press my F7 key as well. I look over at the Lanson and I decide, yeah, he's not moving anywhere. So I decide to take a swing at the KV-4. My sixth sense goes off. Not sure if it was the KV-4 spotted me or the mutant from the side. And unfortunately, I get shut down. And this really is what it comes down to with the ISU-152K. You are not a flexible tank destroyer. If you get caught out of position, you will be punished. Don't think that this vehicle is going to turn its entire tank and snapshot you. Maybe it will do occasionally, but more often than not, what is going to happen is it's going to miss, and then it's going to be a big, old, vulnerable slug of hit points that you will have to try and take advantage of. And when you see these things appearing on the battlefield, then make sure that you work within the tank's reload. You should expect this thing, even with the best of crews, to have about a 16-second reload, maybe a 15-second reload. And so, if you see one fire, look up at the clock, see what the time is. Just maybe count even the 10 seconds in your head, because that is the time that you have to work within to get one shot, multiple shots, lock down its tracks, and then re-engage it from the side. Unfortunately, spoilers, my team is not going to be able to handle this situation. The Lanson just sits at the back and does absolutely nothing. He had every opportunity to be able to win this game, and the 703-2 with the 122mm was unable to really get through a situation where the enemy heavies were just so much healthier than us. So in that scenario, was it a stupid play by me to be aggressive? Well, possibly. But the problem is that when your team is being that passive, you have to be aggressive as well at the same time. To all intents and purposes, the KV-4 wasn't going to leave this position. And you can't really predict where the enemy heavy tanks are going to be. You can have an inkling. But whether you think that you're going to get spotted by an AMX from this location when you try and make the flanking play, yeah, I'm not sure I could account for that. Didn't have the time to be able to go all the way around and use the bridge to go across, so I had to try and use the ford. And my plan was to get over here, get around the town, finish off the KV-4, and then try and get my team fired up for the last 5 minutes remaining of the battle. I picked this game because really it shows you everything that is both great and also terrible about the ISU-152K. You saw the big alpha damage, you saw the big penetration, you saw what a gun caliber can do when it comes to overmatching its enemies as well. You can go through every single 50mm plate in the game. You can overmatch it. That means you can shoot roof decks. That means you can shoot the side of tanks that a lot of vehicles just don't have that 50 1mm of armor that they need to be able to survive the shot from this 152mm caliber gun. However, you also got to see just how annoying it is when the vehicle doesn't behave, when the vehicle doesn't have the accuracy that you need, when it doesn't have the gun depression you need to be flexible. And then you also saw that when you get spotted out in the open, you don't have the flexibility that you need to be able to engage your opponents, and so you better hope that your medium tanks, your light tanks, or even your heavy tanks are actually playing fairly well. And also, I must clarify that this is not a style that comes with the ISU-152K. This is something that's currently on the Twitch Prime care package, which is mimicking Van Gogh's Starry Night masterpiece. So even though this was a loss due to the courageous resistance that we received from our high caliber battle heroes medal, we still get an ace tanker in the ISU-152K for our 4,200 damage and 3 kills. And I don't think I fired any gold shells here, maybe one towards the end when we ran out of standard ammunition, but that allows us to get a 96,000 credits profit with a premium account. Without one, that would still make 56,000 credits profit. And trust me, achieving 4,000 damage in an ISU-152K, it's not going to happen every single game. But really, when you only have to penetrate 7 shots to be able to achieve that, yeah, the credits do seem to come in thick. So next, I presume you're asking, well, where can I get my hands on the ISU-152K? Well, it's coming out on the Asia server first, and then while I can't give you a specific date, it's going to be coming out on the North American server, followed by the European server. That's it. So next, I presume a lot of you are asking, do I think the ISU-152K is worth it? It's a tricky one. I think that this vehicle is going to get a lot of average damage. However, the lack of flexibility of the vehicle will be frustrating for the advanced player. And I think that the advanced player will actually probably prefer to use the SU-130PM. On the other hand, there are players out there who are happy if they can manage to penetrate 1 or 2 shots in an entire game. For those players, I think the ISU-152K is going to be a lot more forgiving. The armor on that vehicle, especially so, is going to help you against taking hits from artillery. And also, if you do manage to get in against some tier 6 and tier 7 tanks, yeah, the armor, while it's not incredible, still will work sometimes. Personally, for me, I would prefer to keep playing the SU-130PM, just to be able to have a semi-traversable turret. Just makes the vehicle so much more flexible. Add that to gun depression advantage, aim time accuracy advantage, speed advantage, view range, and to cap it all off, while a lot of you might be thinking, well, what about the penetration? The ISU-152K, sure, it has got 40mm extra penetration, but look what happens if we load the gold. If we load the gold, the penetration difference is pretty much negligible, only 9mm. And so I'll play the SU-130PM, I'll use those standard rounds when I'm engaging my equal tier opponents and my lesser tier opponents, and when I'm shooting at a Jagdpanzer E100, well, I'm probably going to need 320mm of penetration anyway. There will be another market for this tank, however, and that is not the market that just wants the best tier 8 Soviet tank destroyer, but wants to have the old BL-10 back on this tank. And having been a player who used to love playing the ISU-152 with the old BL-10, does this new ISU-152K give me the same feeling that I had back in the day? No. All of the sacrifices that have been made about this tank to be able to gain that extra penetration are just totally not worth it. And I honestly think that the ISU-152 in the tech tree is by far the better tank. 26 penetration is decent, but when you've already got 260, do you really need to go to 286? And to be able to lose pretty much everything else about this tank, which kind of makes the ISU-152 at least reasonably flexible, feels very painful on the ISU-152K. But I must commend Wargaming. Great job. You've enabled there to be like an interest in the BL-10 gun coming back on the ISU-152K. It has a selling point, but it is not overpowered. This tank will not be overpowered. If this tank is overpowered, then the ISU-152 is also overpowered, because the tech tree tank is pretty much better than it in most ways. So Wargaming, hats off to you. Fantastic release. This is how premium tanks should be inside your game, i.e. slightly worse than tech tree tanks with maybe 1 or 2 novel features that still makes them interesting. I don't think anyone can complain about a premium tank done like this. Good job. And the only slight naysaying that I would have about a tank like this is that Do we really want to have premium tanks in the game that hit as hard as the ISU-152? One of the reasons why the ISU-152 is probably not filling the matchmaker is because it's not a premium tank. Nobody really wants to play that tank again and again and again because it's not going to make them credits. It's not going to make them crew training. Now that you've got the ability to play a tank like that as a premium, you should expect more vehicles like that inside the game, inside the matchmaker. Whether it's a kind of gameplay of the classic ISU-152 tank sitting at the back of the map, dumping out 750 alpha damage shells, I really hope it doesn't become a problem in the matchmaker with having too many of these tanks in. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that's it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, but if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know what you think about the ISU-152K in the comments down below. And as always, sorry that this one came out late, but NDAs, they suck. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.